In this video, we're going to bring some correction to the run arbitrage script. In the old arbitrage script, we calculate prices for Kyber and Uniswap, but the problem is that it's a little bit different from the way we actually execute the arbitrage in the flash loan smart contract. So in this new version of the arbitrage script, we're going to do exactly like what we do in the flash loan contract. That means we are going to calculate for a specific amount of DAI in input how much we'll get in output after the arbitrage. And if this amount of DAI in output is superior to the amount of DAI in input, then maybe that we have an arbitrage opportunity. Then we factor in the transaction cost, and finally we take our decision, do we want to do this arbitrage or not? So there is really a lot of changes, so we're not going to code everything manually. So you are going to basically replace what you have in your run arbitrage file by the code of run arbitrage in the folder 29-corrections in the GitHub repo. So you copy all the code in this file and you replace everything here in run arbitrage. So I'm going to walk you through the code to explain you the main changes. So the beginning is very similar. We still have the Uniswap SDK, the different import. So here the constants are a little bit different. This is more simple. Now we just have one way and amount DAI way. And this time these two are going to be big numbers. So now we're not going to do some arithmetic with JavaScript number that can be too big, but now everything is done with big numbers. So that's a guarantee that we will not have any precision error when doing some calculation with numbers. And here's so 20,000 DAI, so that's what we're gonna have in input of our arbitrage. So this constant is important. So we scroll down, so init is similar at the beginning. So I've added this thing, so new function update ETH price. So here we are going to, in ETH price, we are going to save the latest ETH price by using Kyber. Before we were using a constant for this, so now it's better. And we use set interval to constantly refresh this price. And after we still have our Web3 is subscribe call with the callback where we execute everything. But this time we have moved this code inside the callback. Before it was outside and it was causing Uniswap to not display the latest price. So now this is fixed. And so now we keep scrolling down. And so we want to calculate the input and output of DAI for the two arbitrage from Kyber to Uniswap and from Uniswap to Kyber. One of our constraints is that we want to optimize for speed. We want to do this as fast as possible. So what the naive version of this script will be to first do a call to Kyber, then see the amount of Ether we get from Kyber, then feed this into Uniswap to get the amount of DAI that we get as output. And we will do the same thing for the other direction of the arbitrage, but now we'll have 4 different network calls, but we can be faster if we group some of these calls. So here we're going to get the amount of ETH that we get with Kyber, and at the same time also going to get the amount of ETH that we get with Uniswap. So this is for 2 different directions of the arbitrage. And after here, this time we call Kyber to know what's going to be the amount of DAI as output, and Uniswap also know what's going to be the amount of DAI as output. So what we do is that for the amount of ETH we got from Kyber, we feed this to the call of Uniswap. And for the amount of ETH that we got from Uniswap, we feed this to Kyber. So this call here goes with this one, and this call here goes with this one. And just above, I do some calculation to determine the amount of ETH that we get from Kyber and from Uniswap. So I spare you the detail, but the reason is because we don't get this value directly from these 2 calls above. So we need to make some calculation for this. And so here, this method mul, for example, this is a method of big number. And here this thing, so it comes from Uniswap. So the Uniswap SDK doesn't use big number, but it uses another library called GSBI. It's an alternative to big number to manipulate huge number in JavaScript, and it wrapped this in an object called token amount. In the documentation of Uniswap, you won't find any details, so I had to have a look at their code on GitHub, and that's how I figured out that we needed to call .row.string in order to have a string so that we can fit this to big number here. All right, so we scroll down, and at the end we are able to get the amount of DAI that we get from Kyber as output and the amount of DAI that we get from Uniswap as output. Here we do some similar calculation compared to before, and at the end we console log what we get in input and what we get as output for DAI for the two directions, from Kyber to Uniswap, from Uniswap to Kyber. And if the amount of DAI as output is bigger than the amount of DAI in input, that means we have an arbitrage opportunity. So that's what you see here in the if. So GT means greater than. This is a method of big number again. And so after, the code is very similar to what we had before. We calculate the transaction cost, we calculate the profit by subtracting the transaction cost, and if the profit is positive, we send the transaction. So here this is for one direction of the arbitrage, and here this is for the other direction of the arbitrage. The same thing, if there is a profit, we send the transaction. Okay, so that's it for the correction. We're going to stop here, and in next video we are going to deploy our script to a live server.